Hello, you are watching Anderson Community Television. I'm Kyle Densler, your host for this October edition of Anderson Speaks. Welcome to the show. With us for our first set of guests are two wonderful ladies, and one we got to speak with last year, and I'm glad to have her back. To my right, your left, is Miss Chris Burrows, who's the chairperson of the Labyrinth Arts Festival.
Hi, Kyle.
Thank you for coming back. Good to see you again.
Yes.
And you have brought along a friend. This is Sandy Manteuffel, and she is one of the featured artists this year at the Labyrinth Arts Festival. So it is the month of October, and we have all the exciting, fun fall things like the festivals and the hay rides and the pumpkin patches, and before we know it, it'll be Halloween, and this is one of those cool things that happens. So for folks who are not familiar with the Labyrinth Arts Festival, why don't you go ahead and clue us in on what it's about?
It's basically a fine arts festival. It's not a craft show. There are plenty of those around, so we're trying to offer something a little different. So we have more established fine artists with us, and we have a huge variety of those. We also have a chili lunch that's part of it, and a huge raffle. Each artist contributes an article of their artwork to the raffle, so it's an artsy raffle.
Very cool.
Yes, and we'll have some demonstrations this year too, and of course there are always labyrinth walks.
Okay. As far as types of art, is it kind of focused in one area, or is it a hodgepodge of different kinds of just people creating nice things?
It's a huge variety. We have everything from wood turners to jewelry makers, of course ceramics people such as Sandy, and just all kinds of folks. We have a stained glass artist coming, and somebody who does fused glass, painters. So we have a huge variety. There'll be about 30 fine artists there.
Wow. And so your goal, as you stated earlier, is not just to be another kind of a craft festival or craft fair, but what is it that you want the Labyrinth Arts Festival to be? What do you want people to take away from it?
Well, I want them to gain an appreciation for really fine art, not things that they might buy at the local corner store or something like that that's mass-produced, but to know that they can own and enjoy and have in their homes some original art, and they can get to know the artists who made them, which gives a sense of history to their piece.
Very cool. So as this is as much a focus on local artists as it is on the art, and not just displaying what they have, but creating opportunities to make contact and create relationships with the folks who are creating these things.
Right. It's a very intimate show because of its size. We don't want to get over 32 or 33 artists because we want that casual, warm, family kind of atmosphere. Another thing that we have as part of the festival is live music. And so we'll have everything from Mimi Sinclair on her wonderful violin, to folk singers and pianists, just all kinds of musicians throughout the day. So that's an added feature.
Awesome. I'm going to come back to some of the history of the festival and maybe go over some highlights of years past. Before we do that, let's hop over to Sandy. Now, Sandy, do you always make this big a mess everywhere you go, or is this just special for us?
Yes, I do.
This is a beautiful mess.
And I make a mess at home too.
So for you at home, she is responsible. You handmade everything that we see, and I'm not this, not that, but that's not as pretty, so don't worry about it. But all this beautiful pieces in front of me, you handmade.
Yes.
Are there any? Go ahead and tell us how you got into this.
Well, when I retired from nursing, I took a pottery class at what was then Annie's Mud Pie Shop. Now it's Funky Fired Arts over in Hyde Park. And I took lots of lessons. In the beginning, it was just a mess, but I really got hooked. And now, 18 years later, it's just about all I want to do besides garden. So.
Wow. So had you had interest in this before you took that class?
I've always loved pottery, and I collect antique Majolica pottery, but I hadn't made any. So I really enjoy it. I both throw on a potter's wheel and do hand building.
Wow.
Yeah.
So after 18 years, they tend to say once you've done something for 10,000 hours, that makes you an expert. I would assume you've probably hit that.
I am no expert. There is just so much to learn, and so many clays and so many glazes and so little time. So no, I'll never be an expert, but I have a lot of fun.
A lot of breadth and depth to
Yes.
what's out there for
Yes.
you. So you just didn't want to be bored, and now it's turned into this, right? You're like, I'll go take a class. I can't just sit around.
Right, right.
No, I think that's great.
Right.
And I'm sure that you love nursing, but once you didn't, once you didn't have to work, once you didn't have to do something to get the bills paid, you're kind of like, now I can really do something.
Exactly.
It's neat
Exactly.
to see.
Yeah.
18 years, that's a good amount of time on
Yeah.
something. So tell us the stories about these pieces.
Well, these are kind of my signature pieces. I have a huge garden, and my favorite plants are scented geraniums. Have you ever heard of them?
I don't know if I've heard of the scented kind. But
Scented geraniums. And they have, as you can see, really wonderful shapes, sizes, textures. And they're just wonderful to press into the clay. And then I color them, and this is the result.
so those are literal pressings of.
I use a little pizza roller. I lay the leaf on the clay and roll it in real, real
cool.
smooth. And when in the first firing, the little leaf just burns away and just leaves little ash. Brush it away and paint the leaf, and
So as if it wasn't already one of a kind.
yeah, they're truly
Every design is
Exactly.
really one of a kind.
yeah. And
Very cool.
I love doing just little surprises, like in the bottom of the mug,
If I can look down here. Very cool.
a little leaf.
Little leaf.
Yeah.
Make sure everyone home gets to see that. Very cool.
But-
How many of these particular, since it's a signature piece for you, how many of these do you think you have to produce every year to keep your customers from knocking down your door?
I couldn't begin to count. I just had a high school reunion, and I made 60 mugs to take
Wow.
and give to my classmates. But I love the texture, and it's a lot of fun. Did you want me to tell you about
Absolutely,
these?
yeah. This is a beautiful piece. I was playing with it right before we started taping, and it's just very intricate. I'm interested how you did it and why. Like, what was the...
Well, I took a workshop at Arrowmont School in Tennessee a number of years ago with a wonderful potter from California. Her name is Lana Wilson, and she taught me to make stamps. And like, this is a little hydrangea, and you can see a hydrangea on there.
Okay.
I call that the flower garden. That's the pattern of everything about a garden, tools and flowers and
I can see bugs,
insects.
different
Yep,
kinds of
here's a little
plants
butterfly. And
So you make those.
I do. And they're
then just
just
use them
bisque
on here.
clay, and then I press it into the clay and then form, the mug or the teapot or a platter or whatever. So,
Very cool.
and then I do the stamps in kind of a themed thing, like the flower garden. And then, of course, that's Let It Snow.
Let it snow. I had to do it. Let it snow.
We can't hold him back.
Beautiful.
And it's fun to make the stamps. Those snowflake stamps, actually, I borrowed a friend's snowflake pins, pressed them in the clay, and made those stamps on your desk.
So I'm getting that there's a lot of different things that you can use.
Absolutely.
Like, you could be patterns from, I don't know, a leather belt or
Yes,
a kid's
yes,
toy
yes.
or
Yeah.
anything that's got some sort of
Yeah, here's a
surface
little
to it.
pansy, and that was a button. Just a button. It looked like a pansy.
Wow.
Yeah, so all kinds of good fun
One thing that
things.
Sandy does that's very unique is that she'll take commissionings, and if you have a special event coming up, such as an anniversary, she will have stamped into the, let's say it's a vase, significant names and dates, of events.
cool.
So it's very personalized.
Yeah, like
and-
wedding vases.
Yes, yeah, those are very well received too. I believe that Sandy's a master gardener. Is that correct?
I took the course maybe 15 years ago, but I'm not active in the group now, but I do love gardening. I have a big garden, and we built a studio in my back garden, and it has a little greenhouse where I can grow these beauties all winter.
Wow.
So,
I just like the idea of tilling the soil and bringing something out of it, and then also basically taking the soil and creating something from that beyond the
Yeah.
plants. That's a very neat idea.
well, I call, not that I have a business, but I call my studio From the Earth to You. So,
Very cool. Tell me about this piece. I love the accent with the blue and kind of
it's,
just the darker little
those are
leaves and
both
vines.
hand-built from a slab of clay, and I have a texture mat that I rolled into the clay. And then, did you see the little inscription on the mug?
Not yet. Oh, there it is. It says, the garden suggests there is a place we can meet nature halfway.
And
Beautiful.
I have a series of summer fun, like gardeners know the best dirt. But I like a cup or a plate that has something on it. And
I love the texture of
so,
this.
thank you.
And this you asked me about earlier, and I guessed wrong, but you can let the
Well,
folks at home see
that was in answer to several of my friends who are knitters and asked me to make yarn bowls. I'm not a knitter, so I had to listen to what they wanted. And you put your ball of yarn in and string it out
Okay,
through the
just like
hole.
that.
Yeah,
Very nice.
so
And this we commissioned just last summer.
just whipped it up.
And it's not her typical pattern, but we very happy. We ordered, what, I think 150. So she did them in 2 days. It was amazing. So what are, not to get philosophical, but let's get philosophical. What are some things you've learned about yourself or some lessons that you've taken from your time doing pottery?
Oh, wow.
This is like inside the actor studio.
I'll tell you, one thing that I've learned is most potters are just very generous, creative people. It really amazed me the first time I took a workshop with a sort of famous potter, how they would share all their techniques and everything. But what happens is nobody wants to make something exactly like someone else.
Yeah.
So when I learned stamp making from Lana Wilson, I mean, my things look nothing like hers. I just took what she taught us as a technique, and then you do your own thing. I belong to the Clay Alliance, and there's 150 people in it, and they all do something different. It's just, so I think I've learned about myself that you can just be true to yourself and be creative and love what you do.
I think part of it comes down to I mean, there is a functionality to these things. And before we had machines that did it, I mean, it was people who did it. And without passing on that knowledge, it could cease to exist, or someone will have to kind of reinvent it. So I definitely think, being part of something big in yourself probably draws a lot of people.
We do have 2 potters as part of the Labyrinth Arts Festival. Sandy's one. Both of these potters are very highly regarded in the Cincinnati community. Sandy, of course, and then Jamie Iliff, who has a pretty strong following. And he does a lot of sculpture and things that are not necessarily functional. He doesn't do plates and mugs too much. He more is interested in sculptures, so there'll be that variety
Very cool.
at the art show.
Very cool.
An interesting thing about Jamie's work is he often uses natural clay dug from, I think, the Little Miami.
Yeah, he digs it himself.
And he
Wow.
makes his own glazes. I use commercial glazes. There are so many wonderful ones, I just don't make my own. But Jamie does, and he will actually grind glass and use natural colorants for his
Wow.
glazes.
Wow.
It's
So
very,
let's get back to the festival.
Okay.
We got about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure we just let people give them a best picture they can of what they can expect. So because we want them to come out, because I know it's great. Just go back over some more of the variety of things that we're going to see there, and then give us some specifics about dates, times, things like that.
Okay. The specifics are that it's on October 11th from 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. And it's at the Heritage Universalist Unitarian Church on Newtown Road, which is just outside Anderson Township, or just inside Anderson Township, I'm sorry. The kind of artists that we'll have, are quite varied. For example, Sandy's pottery is very different from Jamie's. So if we have a couple people who use the same medium, we try to be sure that their things look different and feel different. So we have Michael Goldberg with his beautiful stained glass that a lot of it looks like Tiffany glass, and then we have another glass person whose things are fused glass and they're more trays and functional kinds of pieces. We have several jewelry makers who are coming, and their work is just spectacular. And always very popular too at the show. We have a wood turner who's actually going to be turning wood at the show. Michael Ball is his name, and his things are just gorgeous. Everything from urns to bowls to plates, and he does inlaid work, and it's just marvelous to look at. And then we have another person who's going to demonstrate, and her name is Amy Casper, and she's an Anderson Township resident. And she makes purses, and she often makes the fabric that the purses are made of.
Wow.
So she'll be there demonstrating her loom work that she does that creates some of the fabrics that she uses, but not exclusively. But that's a very quick overview of the variety that we have.
It's October 11th, 10 to 4, on Newtown Road at the, which church was it?
Heritage Universalist Unitarian.
Universalist Unitarian Church. In the last couple minutes, I got another question for Sandy. Sandy, as an artist, what makes this festival different?
There are so many nice shows, but this one's just very close to my heart. The people are so nice. The volunteers at the church that, like Chris's committee, and the people are so helpful the day of the event, helping us unload the cars and making sure we have a cup of coffee or they have a little breakfast for us. And in addition to their wonderful food. But I think it's in its third year, I think they've established themselves as a show that people want to be in. And I thank you.
Thank you.
Does every artist or vendor there have something that can be purchased, can be taken home?
Yes.
Very cool.
And then in addition, we have the raffle that people can buy chances to win, some of the different art that the artists have made.
That's awesome.
Too.
And I'm excited. I think, I'm an art lover, and I think probably one of the most beautiful mediums you guys have discussed so far is chili. So I'm very excited.
And it is so good.
Good things about
Yes,
this.
we have meaty chili and vegan.
Really?
Yeah, we have both. So and people can
Takes all kinds.
take some home
anybody
too.
can come. Come on
That's
out.
right.
All right, so again, one more time, October 11th from 10 to 4 at the Heritage Church on Newtown. That's close enough. This has been Sandy Manteuffel, clay artist, and chairperson of the Labyrinth Arts Festival, Chris Burrows. Ladies, thank you both for coming on. Thank you for sharing your beautiful pieces.
Thank
we look
you.
forward to seeing you guys at the festival. We look forward to seeing you at the festival, but we're not done yet. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Anderson Speaks. I'm Kyle Densler, your host, and we are here with a new set of lovely ladies to discuss a serious topic. Let me go ahead and introduce them. This is Marie Hill
That's right.
and Sharon James, and they both are local family mediators who are tied to the Beach Acres Parenting Center right down the road in Anderson. Marie, why don't you start with yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself real quick, about your connections with the area and your history as a family mediator.
All right. Well, I've been an Anderson Township resident for about 40 years, and I worked for Beach Acres for 15 years before retiring. I retired when my grandchildren came to town and opened my own office just down the street here so that I could have some time with my grandchildren. So I am very passionate about mediation. I believe that it's extremely important for families to have a way and a place to resolve conflict and to figure out their issues without going to court or without domestic violence or things worse.
Sharon, your story?
Well, I moved to Cincinnati from San Francisco in '98, and one of the first things I did when I came here was to look for volunteer work. So I started at Beach Acres as a volunteer and quickly met Marie and found out that she was doing mediation training. It was something I'd always wanted to do. My background is counseling. And so I met with her and she invited me to the basic training, and so many years later, I don't know, it's been, maybe 8 years ago, we now do it together. So I've come full circle. But I've always worked at Beach Acres, and now am the manager of the mediation department and do mediation myself, do the direct service.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So the student has become a master.
That's right.
Very cool.
That's right.
So for the folks at home who aren't familiar with this idea of family mediation and what part it plays or what part it can play, give us kind of like that big overview of at its base, what is it and what purpose does it serve?
Okay. Well, primarily we do what we call divorce mediation. So we're mainly working with people who are getting a divorce and would like to do that divorce with dignity. As you know, many people go to court and have terrible divorce battles. But there are other better ways to do their divorce, and mediation offers them the possibility to meet with a mediator, talk about their parenting issues, the kind of parenting plan they'd like to have, to look at their financial issues. We're always going to recommend attorneys, and we know the best attorneys around most of them are doing collaborative divorces these days and trying to help people divorce differently without having two opposing attorneys battling and the couple battling. So there's a better model today. We also do a great deal of post-decree because after divorce there's many, many issues for families, such as a teenager may want the schedule changed a few years after the divorce. Maybe one or both parents wants to get remarried or has a new relationship. There might be school issues or health issues, money issues that bring people back to mediation.
I think one of the things that's happened a lot is relocation. A lot of people are coming to us now to help us figure out, or to help them figure out how can they manage moving across the country. Maybe one parent has lost a job and they want to go back to where their family of origin is at for help. And so helping them figure out that, cross-country schedule is something that we see a lot. And the other thing, too, is that a lot of parents that are divorcing now do not have the means to have two separate households. So they're trying to figure out how to live in the same house and be divorced. I think that's something we've seen recently.
Yes, especially with the recession. And sometimes we do mediation for family issues such as if there's been a death and the will is causing problems with siblings, they might come in together and try to resolve it in a family meeting sort of environment. Other times it's a workplace, especially a small workplace, where say a company on Beachmont Avenue has employees that are at odds with each other or with their boss. They might come in to try to resolve their issues as well.
Wow. So I was thinking, in a way, you guys try to be the adults in the room, but that's not your end goal. Your end goal is to have everyone be adults in the room.
That's right.
And to make decisions that are, I guess, most beneficial and least of a negative impact on the parties involved, especially with children.
That's exactly
Absolutely.
right. And we recognize that people in conflict have diminished capacity to cope and make good decisions and either in their work or their home or with their children. So we see people at their worst often. I always remember this woman leaving my office who had just really had a tantrum in front of her soon-to-be ex-husband. And she said, you know, I'm a vice president of a company and I do really well at work. And I said, I know. I said, in here, facing him, you just are not at your best at all. She says, I'm at my worst.
Wow.
So we want to give people hope that they can move through this crisis of divorce and get things resolved. And certainly there's all the grief issues too around a divorce for adults as well as children that often requires counseling, which we would recommend.
I think what's unique about mediation is that we offer a safe place for them, and we make that, you know, a lot of times when people call in for mediation, they'll say, I just want you to know that this is not going to work, that we're in such high conflict, I can't imagine how this is going to be helpful, or I can't be in the same room, or how will you help me if he or she gets out of control? So there's a lot of concerns that people have in anticipation of the mediation. And so our job is to really provide that safe environment for them and to reassure them that we're not making decisions for them, but we will manage the session and we won't let it get out of control.
What are some of the most common mistakes people make while they're in mediation that either leads to kind of diminished returns or possibly, I don't want to say failure or even walking away from it?
Well, people often are very angry. They might make threats or they might insult each other. And as Sharon said, it's important that it be safe. So if I have a client who's roaring in with four-letter words or put-downs or calling someone crazy or stupid, I'm going to say to them that it's my responsibility to make this a safe environment and that we need to observe the rules of civility in this room. And people very, very much will agree to do that. They don't like being out of control. They're embarrassed by what happens to them in front of this other person. So I think that helps to get it started. But the anger that people come in with is often very severe. Frequently there's been an affair, there's been financial loss, or people have lost a job, or they've just pulled some shenanigan that's caused incredible distrust to develop. So there's good reason for anger. And helping them to try to make decisions while dealing with these very painful family situations is part of what we try to do.
And I think to your question about what mistakes, I think it's sometimes that people make assumptions. They're coming in with, we have all of these things that we have to figure out, and we're going to do all of this in an hour and a half or in a 3 hour, we usually do up to 3 sessions, and each session is an hour and a half. And so oftentimes people will come in with that expectation, we've got to get all this figured out. Or they come in all revved up to make sure that if that other person starts saying things, they've got a good comeback. And so they come in, like Marie said, very defensive. So trying to help them understand that they don't need to be in a defensive position, and it's not necessary that we come up with all of those agreements. That sometimes just learning how to communicate more effectively or differently can be a huge success.
I'm sure a lot of people come in and they're like a bowl full of bees with tissue paper over top of it, just the slightest little thing.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling for some people, like what you said, where this is a civil place and it's safe, I think some people probably appreciate just being able to let that go because
Yes.
it wears you out.
It does.
Yeah.
And often
They're relieved.
when people are sparring, I'll say, how tired are you of this? And people will say, we're exhausted.
Yeah.
You know, all that tension is so exhausting, and they do want to get rid of it. So really, it is very true that people can achieve that in mediation. They can try to communicate differently. And often, the very first question I'll ask people is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you communicate with each other on a daily or weekly basis, with 10 being superbly and 8 being really well? Many people will say, oh, we're 2 or 3, we never talk. Or they might say we text or we leave messages on the
Right.
phone, or we send emails. And then and they'll say, oh, let me show you the text. Let me show you the text from this morning. Well, the texts are often very vicious and mean-spirited, and we don't want to see those. But we do want to try to help them to establish new guidelines for how communication can go. And another thing is with the children, they bring the children back and forth, and often they beep the horn when they're coming in the driveway, and the kids come out. So dad doesn't go to the door, and mom opens it and says hello. She doesn't even face dad. So that may be the first item to talk about, that your children need to hear your two voices in their presence, talking to each other like you would talk to me if I came to pick up a child. Like any old soccer mom comes to the door, you're going to greet her and say, hello, thanks for picking up the kids or whatever. And we don't give that to our children when we're so full of anger. So they'll frequently agree as the very first things they'll do that, okay, we'll start doing that.
Talk a little bit, actually, I say a little bit, but this could be hours, but talk about the children, because we're talking about all of this. I don't want to say it's me-centered, but because a lot of it is legitimate, but all of this anger and this singular focus on this other person and how we've been wronged and how to get them back and slights. And I know from other people's stories how parents can lose focus and hurt their own children in this whole process. How do you react to that? How do you handle it?
I think one of the things that's happened as a result of the mediation that started over 30 years ago at Beach Acres is a program that Marie actually helped to get started. It's called Families in Conflict, and we originally started this for Clermont County. We also now offer it to other counties as well, but that's where we see the children, because I don't oftentimes see children in mediation. But they do come to this program where the parents have been in high conflict. They may or may not have tried mediation. We always encourage them to follow up that program with mediation. But the children come in and they're sick to their stomachs, and they stutter, and they're crying, and little kids that are barely old enough to talk or articulate their emotions can tell you how sad and scared and overwhelmed they are and what they've had to do to survive it. I think one of the things that's difficult is when parents are so entrenched in that conflict that they don't see their part in it, but they'll say, it is horrible for our kids, and he's the one that's making that happen, or she's the one, and they don't understand that they're both contributing to it. But that's where we really see the impact on their children.
And overwhelmingly, we know that every parent loves their children. However angry they are with the other parent, they really love these kids. And that's often a way that you can connect them. You might hear a mom say, oh yeah, he loves the kids, but he doesn't even know who the doctors are or who the teachers are, and he's never been to the orthodontist. Well, now he's going to have to learn that. After divorce, the roles change. So the role that mom might have had is going to shift, so that now they both need to be doing these roles. So, I think that is a way of engaging them, is recognizing that these children need two parents. They need two fully involved parents. Even if one parent travels all week, they can still be fully involved. They can Skype, they can be communicating with the children, they can get support from the other parent, call your dad and tell him the good news or whatever. But we're always working to help these families become stronger after divorce. So we talk to them about a parenting partnership, a business partnership with your children's other parent. That's hard work, but it's so important.
We actually saw that work back to the Families in Conflict program again, where two parents had come to the program because they could not agree on anything. They said vicious things to each other in front of their child, who was 6 years old. And when the program ended, she turned to the person that was facilitating her class and said, I don't want to go home with them, and started to cry. I want to stay with you. This is a person that she had just met a couple weeks before and would rather go home with her then go home with the parents. And so that facilitator stayed with the child while I worked with the parents, and we talked for about maybe an hour and a half after that program. And I asked them if they were just willing to call a truce enough for us to start building back the relationship that they once had, that, you know, not that they're going to be in love, but that they can be civil towards one another. And they both agreed. They left that night holding their child's hand together for the first time. Still gives me cold chills. And they were playing with her out in the snow outside. And this little girl was like, the look on her face, if you could capture that, it was a million words. If we could just get more parents to understand that they can come from that place of saying, it's impossible for us, to it is possible, I mean, that's a pretty amazing thing.
I think a big issue a lot of folks in this situation have is that they're not trying to hurt their child. They're actually trying to do what's
Absolutely.
best. They
Yep.
don't realize the things they do
Right.
that hurt their child. Even when
Yeah.
they think the other spouse is doing something, they point it out and talk about it, and they don't
Yes.
realize you're damaging the child by talking that way about their father or their
right. Yeah.
mother. It's just I can't imagine the amount of education that goes into this. You guys are counselors. I don't know how much actual legal process you're involved in, but it seems like you're part counselors, part attorneys, part teachers, part pastors, part babysitters. I mean, what else am I missing?
Well, thank you for that recognition, because I think since it's not, mediation is not a profession that is certified or licensed, and so oftentimes people don't realize the I don't know what, the amount of effort and work, and you have to just keep up with what's the latest kind of, work that can be helpful to parents. We're constantly going to conferences and associations to learn. It's like a never-ending skill-building process. And so people don't oftentimes recognize all the parts of what it takes to be a mediator. So I
Let's break this
appreciate that.
down because, and you're welcome. You deserve it. Let's break this down. Professionally, license-wise, you are both counselors. A specific kind of counselor, or just because I'm very ignorant about this area.
I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor.
Okay.
But as a mediator, I have to uphold the guidelines for mediation and my own counseling profession. So things like confidentiality, following the ethical norms, I have to do all of that. I have to also do CLEs, not CLEs, I'm not a lawyer, CEUs for counselors and for mediators. So I have to keep myself up to speed, continuing education, that's right. So, and that's very important because things have changed in our profession. One of the things that we talked about was that early on, we were so focused on problem solving and getting agreements when I was first trained that we tried to keep people from expressing emotion. So if somebody would cry or somebody would get angry, we'd say, all right, now we have to focus on the future. Well, we still want them to focus on the future. However, we recognize that emotions are important, and that if people don't feel they're being heard, they often will just keep coming back to the same old stuff until there's some recognition of what's going on for them. And we can often provide them. You know, I think sometimes someone will be talking and they'll say something and the person responds. And I'll say, now, Bill, I didn't hear the same thing you heard. What I heard was, and I'll say what I heard her say, and she'll say, that's right. And because, so often that the way that I hear you because of my relationship with you is just not accurate.
Right.
It's through a lens.
That's often distorted.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're offered a fair and balanced kind of atmosphere and a third-party ear that is not kind of polluted, so to speak.
That's a nice way to say it, yes.
And that is your intention. I mean, we've been talking about this, how the whole idea of being in a position of not being judgmental, it is very hard. Mediators are supposed to be impartial. We're not taking sides, and of course we don't do that. But sometimes it is difficult to hear things that you have some issue with, personal issues. So I think.
Is there not room to say, hey, that sort of behavior, we can judge this behavior and we can deem it hurtful or damaging or negative towards what we're trying to do or hurtful towards a loved one without saying, well, because you did that, I'm now on this person's side.
That's right.
Do you guys have that
Oh,
freedom?
absolutely.
And
We-
there's go
yes.
ahead.
Yeah, we can certainly name behaviors that are not acceptable. An example that frequently comes up is Facebook postings.
Oh.
Things that people put on Facebook about their soon-to-be ex or
my
about
gosh.
whatever. And I can say you have to stop that. There can be no more comments about your children's father or mother on Facebook. You just stop that right now. I see that as advocating for the children.
Yeah.
But I also can name behaviors that I just think are not acceptable. And I think because I'm older, I can get away with a lot of that. I can just be my old teacher self and say, you just cannot do that. You cannot call her that name. Do not use that word again. A man will call a woman crazy. That's one of my buttons. And I'll say, don't call her crazy again. And don't ever let your sons hear that. That's a very demeaning word. I don't want to hear that anymore. But I'll be careful to try to keep it balanced so that I'm not just picking on him.
Yeah.
But definitely, we're going to call people out on behaviors because this isn't a mushy sort of process. It's really working with people's lives so that they can get a better sense of direction, better grounding, and move forward toward a better future.
I think in mediation too, there's a list of questions that can be very helpful, and that's what we talk about in the mediation training, like how is that helpful to you, or what is it that you need? And sometimes the way in which you ask those questions or the kinds of questions you're asking gets them to figure things out themselves without you taking sides or being partial.
So, do you guys have a kind of a modus operandi with how you, or a certain way that you approach everything and you kind of step through, like you talked about having questions and things like that? Or is it a discovery time? We're going to sit down, we're going to learn about this, and then what you learn at that point then is going to steer wherever you need to go.
Well, at Beachacres, we have a process that we use, but we employ contractors. I'm the only employee mediator there. But we all have our own personality, our own personal spin. And some people will start off a mediation session a little differently than I might. But overall, you're there to gather information, to find out what their goals are, and to help them come to those agreements, or at least to have a conversation about communication or whatever the issues are. So there is a process, but everybody has a little different way of doing it.
And I'm going to be inviting people to try not to see me as a judge or I'm not a lawyer, but to be thinking of me as somebody that can interpret the law for them. Because I say, this is your process. The goal here is for the two of you to have conversations with each other so that you can come up with solutions and new ways of approaching things. Especially around parenting, and most of what the mediation that we do is around parenting. So, I'm also going to be asking them about their goals, and if if someone says, for instance, I want to stay in the house, I might say, let's try to expand those goals to be bigger at the outset. So think about your goals for your children. What kind of goals do you have? What kind of a divorce do you want to have? How do you want things to be going forward? So, and I'll write those down, and those will usually be hanging up every time they come.
I think what you're saying about the setting the tone in the beginning means everything, because some people have never been into mediation before, others have, and it may not have gone well. Others are, we always talk in the training about how people are driving in to the mediation session. They may have been on the road for 20 minutes and they're thinking all about, if he starts that or if she does this is what I'm going to do, and they kind of get themselves all, geared up for this pretty intense session, or maybe they haven't seen each other for months or had a conversation in a year. So we always try to set this tone like a very calm. In fact, our rule is before mediation starts, if it's at 3 o'clock, we're in that room, the mediator, by at least 1/4 to get ourselves calm and centered, because that really helps to set that tone. And I think it makes a difference. People feel more relaxed and more at ease if we're approaching it in that way with them.
Can I assume you don't have coffee and cookies out in the lobby? Or caffeine and
We
sugar?
have water.
Yeah, we don't have cookies, I'm sorry to say.
No cookies. We did
just
have
imagine-
candy at one time.
I just
but-
imagine some rule like, listen, sir, we're going to do this again next week. You're not allowed to have coffee up to 2 hours before you come here. We need you to relax.
And certainly no
Right.
alcohol.
Oh, geez.
But we have a beautiful campus, and so we do encourage people to take breaks, and I think that really helps too. Anytime it's feeling too much for you, you are welcome to go out and walk around the campus, take 5. And while you're doing that, I will not be sitting in here with the other party and talking with them. So we just give them all of these opportunities to feel more at ease. I think that's really important.
What are some, and I'm thinking like if I asked a teacher this, the teacher wouldn't say, well, sometimes I just want to strangle the kids. But what are some of the frustrations that you guys run into, or what are certain challenges? Because I can imagine sitting there, and as a former teacher myself, and as a parent, wanting to guide the person so that they can get it on their own, but sometimes just wanting to be like, just get it, or just this is what it is. I'm just going
Yeah.
to tell you. What are the things that you all struggle with?
It's really hard if they don't come back. You really cannot get most things resolved in a single session. We are trying to build a foundation where the communication will improve, where they'll talk to each other differently, where they may have parenting things that they discuss, and then they get a way of doing that in the future. We might have very strict guidelines about their communication, such as their texts, their email, their phone messages. And you want them to come back and see how that's going. If they do come back, sometimes it happens that one person says, well, I've been trying, but he still won't say hello. And I might say, well, did you say hello when you came into the mediation waiting area? Well, no. You know, that's where it has to start. They have to start in wherever they see each other, being able to say, hello, Mary, hello, Tom. You don't have to say, well, how's your job going? You're doing well? Are you up for a raise? You don't have to do any of that small talk. But just the normal civilities that you would do is all we're asking them to do. And it doesn't always work. People sometimes say,
That's right.
I mean, I remember a man whose wife had an affair and left the marriage. He could not greet her. And he said, ma'am, I know it's important. And I had even interviewed their children. And I had a whole list of things that the children said. The first thing the children said was, we want mom and dad to get back together again. Well, mom was already remarried. I mean, it wasn't going to ever happen again. But they wanted mom to talk to each other in a nice way, mom and dad to talk in a nice way. He couldn't agree to that. But I've had other situations where I've interviewed one or more children, and the parents are just blown away with, I had no idea the children felt that way. And I remember one little girl at Beach Acres, she was about 7 years old, and when her dad came into the waiting area, she kept her head down. And so when I interviewed her, I said, tell me about your dad's house. And she told me all the things she loves to do with her dad, and then all the things she loves to do with her mom. And I said, do you hug your dad when you see him? Oh, yes. Well, you didn't hug him today. She says, I know. Do you know why that was? She says, I didn't think my mom would like it. And so when I talked to the mom and dad, mom was stunned. She said, I never told her not to hug her dad. And when I pursued it with the little girl, I said, when do you hug your dad? She says, once we get down the road, I hug him. But, the parents then agreed that they had to give this child permission to be affectionate with each other, to be warm, to call each other. Some kids never call the other parent because they're afraid that the parent they're with won't like it.
In her natural understanding and dealing with, she made that that
Assumption.
Yes.
that I can't be happy about this one when I'm around
That's
this
right.
one.
I
Right.
can't talk about dad's house with mom
They
or mom's
love-
They
house
may
with
never
dad.
have enforced
they-
that in any way.
That's
They
right.
love both parents so much, and they feel that their role has become to protect both. Sometimes it is because one parent is sort of giving that message, but a lot of times it's just the child deciding that on their own. Can't let, always have to make sure that dad is okay when I'm at mom's or mom is okay. And so they take on very adult roles at very early ages.
That is not something they should be worrying about.
Not at all.
Absolutely.
That is so sad.
Not at all.
Practice on your younger siblings.
Yeah.
But you can,
Yeah.
that. But man,
That's right.
I can't imagine the weight.
Well, it
That's right.
robs them of the necessary job that they have of being a kid and just doing all the stuff that kids have to figure out, how to become a teenager or how to make friends or, all of those things. It takes them away from that. It shifts their focus to how do I help, my mom and dad do all of this.
And there's a big difference between interrogating your child when they come home. Was your dad's girlfriend there last night? And did you ask your dad for the child support money? And tell your mom to send clean clothes. All these things that go back and forth that are very hurtful to children. They're caught in the middle. It's very different environment when you can say, wow, you went to Coney Island with your dad? How great is that? Or look at the new shoes your mom bought you. That kind of thing is very affirming for children. But the interrogation is brutal.
Kids aren't Post-it notes. You don't write messages on them and
That's
send them
exactly
to the person you
right.
don't want to talk to.
Oh, that's such a great way of saying it.
I
You
think
can- you
there's
can
a
have it.
couple of other things too. Just thinking about mediation is a lot of times people, because sometimes going to court or having an attorney is very expensive, they think mediation will be expensive as well. But I know that you do this as well in your practice. We have a sliding scale, and so it makes it very affordable for parents, and certainly oftentimes much cheaper than going to court. The other thing I wanted to say too is that we have mediators we go to a lot of, we have like the Mediation Council here in Cincinnati. We also have the Association of Conflict Resolution, and they're actually bringing their big conference to Cincinnati
Awesome.
in October. So that'll be wonderful.
Well, I had just one more question. We may
Sure,
have time.
yeah.
Maybe you can. How do you guys not burn out? You guys take long vacations?
Well, no, we don't actually
I
take
just did
long
that.
vacations, but we do. We do take vacation. We try very hard not to take our cases home.
we talk with each other.
We talk with
consult.
each other, which is
Yeah.
very important. I think it was harder as a young mediator not to do that, but it is extremely important that I keep myself centered, that I do my own spiritual practice, so that I am not going to be consumed by the pain and suffering of my clients.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, but there's more to talk about. Love to have both of you back. This has been Marie Hill and Sharon James, family mediators. And just thank you for your time. Thank you. And
Thank you.
again, I want to have you back and
Thank you.
just dig more into this because there's a lot more.
Thank you.
We are done
Thank you.
for the day. Enjoy your month, and we'll see you next time.